Okay, looks like we're ready to get started. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and spending part of their day with us and to listen to today's presentation on how to use compensation planning to attract, incent, and retain your top talent. My name is Tom McEwen. I am President of North America at Curo Compensation, and we're doing today's webinar in conjunction with our partner Talent Guard, who I'd like to thank for setting up this presentation. The Curo Compensation tool is an integrated part of the Talent Guard solution, so we'll be talking about that in this coming webinar. Let's talk and start off. It's always good to begin with how a customer is actually using a solution to improve their environment. We'll look and just talk about one of the financial services customers who's implemented our compensation planning solution recently. This was an organization that was almost $1 billion in revenue and over 3,000 full-time employees. The company provides financial services such as pricing and reference data and had 21 offices internationally around the globe. Oddly enough, surprisingly enough, they were doing all of their compensation review and planning via spreadsheet. And as you can imagine, it was a security and compliance nightmare, particularly in regulated industries such as pharmaceutical, financial, or essentially any industry that either sells to the government or is public. Really puts itself at risk when they do things on a spreadsheet, just by the example of it being a flat file that can be walked out of an organization or very easily written over formulas. But in this particular instance, the client moved off spreadsheets and went over to use the compensation planning tool, basically giving the management team, which had limited visibility and control over the workflow, a holistic centralized view. And also things you miss with a spreadsheet-based compensation is manager recommendations. The detail of them are very rarely able to be seen. They have to be aggregated. So bringing in a solution really helped this customer move forward and bring their business into the 21st century with modern compliance and financial tools. So today, we're going to talk about compensation planning. And how it weaves through the talent management process. But I want to look at it in an overall view and how it affects different areas in the organization. We'll start out and take a strategic look at compensation planning and review and how it addresses at the C-suite. Basically, if you're going to sell anything to the CEO in your organization, it has to be something that's going to increase business, increase revenue. So from a strategic aspect, the ability for compensation planning and the entire talent management suite to increase employee engagement and productivity of those employees is the way it's going to sell to the top echelons of a corporation. Moving down to the more tactical aspects and how you're going to sell it to line managers and human resources, you have to look at how it makes life easier for people. First of all, the transparency issues, being able to see through and talk about how your compensation philosophy is built. It has to be able to demonstratively show a clear, direct arrow between pay and performance. And it also has to show the ability of how it's empowering your manpower, getting them up to be able to do more with what they have and be incenting them to do so. And then the third leg is more operational. Often what you might address to your CFO or your finance department. The ability to have budget control during the compensation planning and review process. 80% of companies tend to go over when they're doing their annual merit and bonuses, and that often puts a burden on the company because usually 60 to 70% of a company's expenses are tied up in salaries and manpower. The ability to have efficient savings, governance and security, which we talked about with our finance customer, and the consistency of fairness, and that you're applying the same rules across the organization to those who are getting raises and bonuses fairly. So moving on, what we're going to talk about is how we weave compensation planning and management through the entire talent management cycle. We're going to talk first on how you use it to attract and recruit the best talent into your organization, and a couple of things that recruiters look for and how compensation works as part of that. Then we're going to move on to the performance management aspects. Once you have people on board, how do you incent them so that you get the most out of them while you're managing them? And then finally, when you have that great talent that's both come on board and hit their targets, how do you reward them? Not only through the financial aspect, through compensation planning and management, but also through career pathing and how you tie the two together so that people, as they get promoted and moved on to bigger assignments, are content with continuing to stay with the organization. Nothing worse than training and putting someone through the process and then having them to go to work for someone else. You want to make sure you can retain that great talent. So let's start off with that first circle we were talking about in attracting talent. So meet Sarah, a client who we like to describe as a recruiting rock star. Her job is to go out and get a large pipeline of candidates to bring into your growing organization, and then be able to screen them, pull them through, and make sure that you pull the trigger on the right candidates. Probably as much of a selling job as anything in the industry. She has to build a pipeline, and she has to close the best candidates, getting them in the door to feed your organization. And this is not a seasonal thing. Recruiting in great companies is something that's going on all of the time. So first, what are you after when you're recruiting people? I don't think anybody's been in an organization or in the workforce for long and hasn't heard the phrase of an A player. That's the top talent you're looking for, and everybody is looking for them in their companies. There might be different definitions or different gradations of A players, but in a recent article by Forbes magazine, they identified, probably which I would agree with and most would, what are the five key components or attributes of an A player. The first is an A player is someone who's able to anticipate, someone who's going to come into an organization and, like a master chess player, be able to see 2 or 3 moves down the line. That way they can feed into your overall business philosophy and not be someone who's just always interested in the micro or the current environment. You want someone who's not only helping you execute a plan, but also visualizes that plan. Second, you want to make sure that these people are competitive. That's a stock and trade of an A player. They want to be the best at what they do, and they are always aware of what's going on around them and what they need to improve on to make themselves even better. Someone who's an A player is never content with what they have. They may know they're the best today, but they know if they don't work on it, they're not going to be the best tomorrow. Third attribute is integrity. An A player is someone generally who doesn't come into your organization as a job just to have a job while they're looking for something else. When an A player signs on, they're signing on to your vision, and their intent is to come work for you under the conditions they've assumed have happened, and they're going to be with your organization as long as they're treated and rewarded well. A players are also very disciplined. So they like to be in organizations that are very disciplined, organizations that can execute a plan, come through on their promises, and hit their objectives. So they're going to be like that. They're going to be looking for organizations like that. And then all of these 4 would feed into why you would believe that an A player is confident. They know that they have the tools to make you successful, and they're going to make sure that they're rewarded properly, or chances are they'll go they know that they're in demand. So an A player. How do you recruit that A player? There's a couple of high-level practices that'll help you get those A players in the door. I think, first of all, what a company needs to do for each position in their organization is build a model of what that ideal player looks like. It's easier for companies that have a little history behind them, because you probably have, hopefully you have people in your organization that are doing the job successfully, and you're able to survey them and observe them and find out, okay, they have this education, this work ethic, this skill set. This is the type of person who's going to be successful in this position. You take that and apply that out to your job description, so you can bring in people of that similar skill set and model. Often when you get to the point where you're recruiting a large number of people, it's good to bring in professional sourcing. We see that Sarah is a great rock star recruiter, but as things go up, you're either going to increase her her team many X-fold. But often that's more of a screening of a development aspect. And a lot of times the screening is left to someone in professional sourcing. So I'd highly recommend as you get along, even though you have applicant tracking solutions and a recruiting team, particularly as you get to the more upper levels in your corporation, you're probably going to incorporate some professional sourcing to get those A players in. Once you got them in and they're moving through the process, the thing you want to look for is a history of success. Usually the resume tends to tell it all, but you have to have good detailed interviewing to be able to drill down onto what someone has done before. Were they successful at it? Were they in multiple places? Were they successful? Or is there, the resume more of a facade? And then the compensation part of it that I talked about, you have to know what to pay people. As I talked about earlier in the A player, they're very confident. And with the prevalence of social media and chat groups and collaborative things out there, they know what their position pays. So you have to know what that position pays. And unfortunately, we had a big downturn back in 2009 to 2011, 12, where the economy went down and people got very used to lowballing talent as it came in the door. Even though we're in 2016 now, a recent survey by the Association for Talent Development uncovered that almost half of recruiters indicate that their employers still don't realize candidates will no longer accept those 2009 to 2011, 12 lowballed salaries because they're not desperate to get jobs now. It's back to more of a candidate's market where they can shop around and find the best candidate. So it's very important to be able to go out and know what these people expect to be paid and be able to pay them. And what helps you out in that aspect is to have a compensation solution that can also import market data. So there are surveys out there that'll tell you what an engineer, what a salesperson, what a finance person should be making with this many years of experience in this particular geography. And having a place where you can house that, both to compare against your internal talent, but also to be able to see, what I'm going to have to pay external talent to get them in here is very important for the recruiting, from the recruiting aspect. So knowing what the market is paying, so having a system that can hold that information and having access to that information through a subscription or whatever it takes to bring it in-house. Okay, so now you've got that top talent on board. How do you incent them so that they produce for you? You've gone through all the expense, the bidding, you've made the investment. Now, how do you make that investment pay off? Well, let's talk to Jill. She's a comp guru, another another client that actually knows what it's like, but she's got to go out and find a way to hang the carrot or whatever to make people be able to enable people to perform and succeed within your organization. So she has to be able to incent those A players that are brought in to go after the carrot, as we see here, and to produce. And nice thing you find out about A players is they want to succeed. You'll notice that first bullet I put there. One thing you don't want to do with A players is micromanage them. I always like to use a phrase that's common in sports is you don't want to control your best talent. You want to unleash them. Give them the targets to go after and let them go forward. Modest checkpoints along the way to be able to see if they're hitting their goals and getting on targets. But it's not someone you want to be hovering over all the time, making sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's. They'll know to do that. You want to give them targets, support them as they need to get there, and let them go. Also, what you got to do to incent A players is to know that it's an organization where there can be movement. So what is the future potential? And this will tie in a little bit when we talk about the career pathing, but showing an organization where someone can move forward. Also, being able to tap in and find out, not just strictly from a manager's standpoint, but what is the rest of the organization? Usually what you'll find about A players is they make people around them better. So it's important to be able to get feedback from peers, other managers, and also even from reports if you're bringing someone in as a manager, to be able to see what the people who work for them actually think of them. You've heard the expression before that people join companies and quit managers. It's often important to make sure that your employees are thriving and doing well under particular managers. And then the fourth bullet there, again, tying into that compensation theme, is you got to have a direct link between pay and performance. Recent quote out of the Harvard Business Review shows that 61% of workers don't see a clear link between pay and performance. So that's almost 2/3 of your company is actually has no idea once they've made their goals or their bonuses, whatever, they have no idea how they're going to be paid on those. Just think of that. How disincenting is that? You want someone to reach a target, but once they get there, they have no idea how they're going to be compensated for it. So you want to make sure that you have a pay philosophy within your corporation that, one, is understandable to everybody. And I highly encourage all of you to just, anybody on this webinar, to go to your HR department. If you're in the HR department, say, do we actually have a reward of a compensation philosophy, pay for performance within our company? Chances are you don't. You've kind of delegated it out to the various departments, and that's what leads to this type of statistic where companies have no idea, or individuals in companies have no idea as to how they're going to get paid. Again, this is where you're able to bring in a compensation solution that can tie in with however you're incenting your people, whether it's a direct link between performance grades that they might receive through your performance management system that dictates salary and bonus, or it might be some other factors that come into. But it's very important that the individual knows the formula that calculates how much they're going to get paid. And then the corporation does too, because on the individual side, it leads to disappointment. On the corporation side, it leads to overspending. So having the ability to put formulas into a system, have it reflect off of the performance of the individual and the recommendations of those around you is very key to being able to have a very good compensation strategy and a happy employee base. And third, let's look at retaining talent. So we've talked about how you bring people on board. Once you bring them on board, how you put the carrot out there and incent them, and how you evaluate and monitor them, how they move forward. Now, how do you retain those talents? So if you look at one step at a time, incenting, you come on board. Two, performance, it's how you're doing. Okay, so you got someone who's good that came on board, someone who's doing a great job. Now, how do you retain them? As I talked about earlier, there's nothing worse than training and building a great employee and then having him go work for someone else. So let's meet John, our third candidate, who our third manager in the organization. He's in charge of organizational development, affectionately referred to possibly as the dream maker. He's the one who puts together the career path, the succession plans, everything in your organization that tells people and builds the paths of you succeed with us. Here are the riches and opportunities that you have going forward to make yourself successful and build a great career here with us. So what are the challenges that John faces? Well, how does he retain those A players? Going back to all those factors we talk about of what's in an A player. One thing you'll find out about A players, first of all, they're very smart people, and smart people do tend to get bored after a while. So they're always going to be looking for, I succeed here, where do I go to next? So career pathing is absolutely essential to an A player. You may have that rare instance, and it's a smaller part of the population. If you're familiar with the 9 box, you could have someone on the bottom part of the 9 box going all the way out to the third quadrant, but on the bottom is someone who just comes in, loves being an individual contributor, doing their job, and they're willing to do it forever. a salesperson who just loves to sell, doesn't want to be a manager, a developer who just wants to write code and doesn't want to move on. There are these individuals out there. Usually, though, what you find is A players, when they come in, are potentials. So you got to be able to show and build career paths for them. Then you have to be able to develop that potential. You just don't move forward by being successful at your current job. You have to be potential has to be developed. That involves learning management, building these career paths with learning involved and hitting benchmarks, spending time in possibly other departments, learning a broader scope than just what's your particular job. And to get this potential developed, in addition to the traditional learning courses you might take, there's probably a little on-the-job mentoring, which is a very common practice in successful companies, where you would assign a manager, possibly often not the current manager of an individual, who's going to kind of look over them and be able to give them tips and pointers on how they might be able to do other jobs as they're being shopped around. And it also gets flipped from the point that the mentee gets to follow around the mentor and see how they're doing their jobs. So it's known, what are the things I'm going to have to be able to do if I become a manager or I become an executive that I'm either not capable or not doing right now. So career pathing, developing potential, and mentoring, very key non-financial aspects to retaining those A players and building them into bigger contributors in their organization. But then we tie back in the compensation element from the standpoint, if you're going to promote these people, they're pretty much expecting that the raise that comes with that promotion is going to be adequate and something that equates to what the position is going to be demanding. Unfortunately, according to the survey group, a group that talks to HR departments and surveys their employees, most of the times when employees do get promoted, the rewards don't seem to live up to expectations. The reason for that is most companies don't have a baseline of what the new position is going to demand. So they think you're making this in this position. I would have normally given you a 5% raise just for having a good year last year, but I'll give you an 8% because you're getting promoted too. When generally that may not get the employee into the range of people who are currently doing that job. And again, going back to those attributes of an A player, they're going to know what people in those jobs get paid, either through talking to people at your company or going out into onto the network and finding out what industry trends are, or following Towers Watson or any of the people out there as to what people are getting paid for that particular position. And what are results? You have a great event where you've promoted someone, you want all that goodwill to keep going, they get the raise, and you got an unhappy manager who was a happy employee. So how do you fight that? One, it's very essential to build out a roadmap ahead of time of where this individual can go as far as a career path and development. So not being reactive and doing it when it comes on board. You build out a plan. This is where you are today as a finance person at the B level. Maybe next you move into the A level, which is a more senior individual contributor category. And then we move into the various different management aspects that you can give. And all along providing a transparency at that point as what the individual can expect as far as compensation increases and promotional raises. So it's important, one, to show the roadmap and show all of the objectives that have to be achieved to get to that next spot in the organization, but then also being able to point out what those various, the compensational reward is in addition to the new title and the new responsibilities. And then tying that career development map and retention guide, again, once more into your compensation management system, is being able to, when you do your annual reviews, to be able to know those new ranges of the particular job categories. So, for example, you might have someone as part of just a department that reports, and you have them in their current job grade, and you might have the minimums and maximums for that particular position that they're in now. If you have something that can trigger, for example, when someone gets promoted, puts a new job grade or a new job position title in there, it would automatically show up what the new minimum and maximums for that range is. So you're not undershooting your employee when you're promoting them. You're putting them into the range of the people he knows he's been talking to, whether inside the company or out, so that you're giving the right job. So once again, you haven't trained, developed, and groomed a future leader in your company only to have them go somewhere else because you either didn't know what you were supposed to pay them or you tried to be too cheap on it. So being able to tie, again, the career development path in with the promotion and rewarding of raises is very key to rewarding that great talent. So looking as we go through it, we talked a little bit about all of these various aspects. So how do you attract talent, both the non and the compensation aspects to attracting talent? How do you incent people once you bring them on board, both through financial and non-financial needs, and then tying that in with how well they're doing as a performer? And then the next stage, moving your high performers along in the organization, both from a development aspect, a learning aspect, and a career pathing aspect, so that it ties in that they get the reward that they're expecting to get. Now that reward is, again, could be definitely in the form of raises, but also more responsibility, bigger title and leadership for the individual. So you can see how compensation planning weaves through all of these various aspects of talent management. And as we go back to our original slide, we talked about what the characteristics are of an A player. Flip that on the mirror side is, if this is what you're looking for, and if you're looking for A players, you're looking people who can anticipate, who are competitive, have integrity, are disciplined and confident. You look at the mirror image of that, you want to have those same attributes as an organization, because that's what they're going to be looking for. They want to work for someone at a place that matches their characteristics. So be aware as an organization, you have to be able to anticipate with your A players, knowing what they're going to be, knowing what you need to pay them to keep them on board. You don't want to be too late to give that raise or that promotion, because if you're not, there are people who are going to be out there willing to pay it. And once someone has gotten an offer from another company, it's very low probability, even if you match it and top it, that you're going to be able to keep that individual. So you don't want to be too late to pay. We often refer to paying the right salary and incentives as talent insurance. You're ensuring that these people are going to stay on board. If you go to the competitive aspect, I said those A players know what they're worth, so you have to know what they're worth. You always have to be in a mindset of you're competing not only for the new talent coming in the door, but you're competing for the talent that you have. You want to make sure that you're going after those people as if they're a new employee when they're in your employ to keep them on board. Integrity, as I talked about, something that A players have. They're honest, they're loyal. They don't come to your company just to look for another job, to have a paycheck coming in. They buy in when they come on board. One thing that'll dissuade an A player quicker than anything is evidence that someone is lying or hiding something from them. So if you're going to tell someone that this is what a manager gets at this particular level, and they talk to a colleague in the same position who's getting more, or they talk to someone outside, it's very difficult for that manager to regain the trust again if they've misled an employee and they find out. And that's the fastest way probably to lose an A player. Being disciplined, being able to stay on target. If you're going to be expecting that from your A players, they have to expect that from the organization. So if you've got a master strategy, which every company does, boiled down to individual departments, and you're expecting your players to stay on target, you have to be, as a management staff, you have to be able to demonstrate to them that you're staying on target. So keep them informed. Are we making our targets as a team? Are we making our targets as a company? If you're not, be able to collaborate with your A players so that they can help get you back on target. And then once again, confident organization attracts confident people. And if you're not confident in your people and you're not paying them well enough, as again, yeah, they're going to find someone else who can actually give them what they want. So when it gets right down to it, organizations look at compensation as something that supports their company brand. The various lists that come out every year, I'm sure you've all seen the Fortune. I think Forbes has one as well, the 100 best companies to work for. There are a number of others, some that are locally, each city probably has its 50 best companies to work for. There are others that rate different categories, the companies that are able to recruit the best and brightest out of college or the best and brightest from the industry. I think it's fair to say that anybody in business today would love to be on these particular lists because it gives you the ability to put informational together to go out to the marketplace to be able to sell prospective candidates to bring them in the organization. That's the attract aspect. You want to continually be advertising this to your employee base so that they know they're with a company that is one of the best because of their transparency and their ability to compensate the right people. So compensation ties into all of this. And you can see the quote down below that World at Work, which is a very big rewards organization, and they have their total rewards conference every year in the spring. As a matter of fact, just happened the beginning of June. Compensation is always the number one reason, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, the number one reason why employees choose to stay at an organization, choose to go to and stay at an organization. Generally, it's followed by number two is the ability to have career opportunities at that particular organization. And number three is usually quality of life. All things that you can measure with a total talent management system. But you can see, as we demonstrated in this webinar, how compensation moves through every one of them in the ability to attract, incent, and retain top talent. So kind of summing up that a compensation planning solution gives an organization to make informed decisions throughout the entire review and attraction process. It gives you the ability to have a scenario planning based on how much budget you're going to have for raises and bonuses in a year. It gives you the ability to demonstrate, import, and show benchmarks as to what am I going to need to incent and to reward people for good performance and for promotion. It validates your overall compensation philosophy and reward plan to seeing that what we're actually putting down in the organization matches our philosophy. Very big, it gives leadership all the way down the hierarchy the ability to have the visibility to what everybody's being paid and what their managers are recommending and saying about them. One thing you can't get from a spreadsheet is if you have something that starts with a master sheet and then you splice it and send it out to 40 different individuals and then you have to roll it back up. You're not going to have the comments and the detailed input from the managers as to who's performing and why we're rewarding them. The ability to have a holistic system where everything is in one place allows the CEO to go 3 or 4 levels below them, pull up a manager's reports and review recommendations and see exactly why someone got something, what they got, and if this is consistent with his or her overall philosophy for the company. And being able to have a solution that can handle all different incentive types. The most common that we often deal with are salary and some kind of incentive in the terms of cash bonuses and stuff. But a lot of growing companies and a lot of mature companies are often handing out equity as a form of reward, stock options, actual stock itself, and other long-term incentives that a solution needs to be able to handle if it's going to help you build the company and the great brand that you want. So finally, looking at compensation as part of the entire Talent Guard solution, as you can see, it's one part of a larger platform with performance, career pathing, succession management, different aspects of performance, the 360 feedback, the development and learning management, and also the education and reward aspect of being able to give out certifications. Talent Guard has a very rich customer base. It has a number of large companies that push, and if you contact us, we'd be happy to tell you about some of them. But over 2,100 competencies in their libraries, over 184 job families, and 2,800 profiles. Integrated solution that brings in all aspects of the talent management philosophy. So, at this point, we would like to first point out that if you enjoyed what you heard today, we will actually be doing a demonstration of the Talent Guard compensation solution powered by Curo on July 6th at 1 p.m. Central Time. So if you are able to join us, please click on that link or contact Talent Guard through their website or the email below, info@talentguard.com. So I think at this point, we are going to entertain some questions. Okay, so I've had a couple come in through the course of the webinar. First of all, can the Talent Guard suite be implemented one solution at a time, or does it have to be all implemented at once? No, the solution is very modular. So you can implement compensation, performance, career pathing, any one of them first, and then bring the additional solutions on later. Usually, it tends to dictate by what you have the most immediate problem with. So, very modular platform that allows you to bring on solutions one at a time. Second, can the compensation solution handle multiple currencies? Oh, absolutely. Currently, the Talent Guard Curo compensation solution is deployed in over 80 countries with over 40 currencies. If you come to the demonstration, that's one of the hallmarks that we like to show off, how quickly you can move back and forth between currencies, which is very useful if you have managers in different countries. Perhaps somebody in Europe is valuing their personnel in euros, but that person's manager might be in the United States who has to look at things in dollars. So it gives you'll see in the demonstration, if you decide to attend, that the evaluation can be done in the native currency, and then the approval can be done in the currency of the next level manager. So absolutely, a compensation solution can handle multiple currencies. Okay, and the next one is, can raises and bonuses be triggered from formulas based on the performance scores? Absolutely. I alluded to this a little bit during the Incent part of the presentation. Yes, the solution can basically handle any type of formula-based compensation computation that you need to make. So if it's right off of the performance scores, if you have a 1 to 5 solution and a 4 gives you a 5%, you can have that triggered that way. If you have multiple components to it, might be a percentage based on individual performance, a percentage based on company performance. We can handle that type of computation, and we can also have multiple bonus philosophies. So you might have one that's different for individual contributors, managers, and executives. So that can be handled all within the solution very, very easily and transparently. Got a couple more here. Let me see what I got. How long does it take to implement a process as such, and where is the best place to get started? Good question, particularly the way it is broken up, because what's very important is to get the right process in place before you implement a solution. We always like to say in the software world, if you have a bad process, manual process, it's like walking towards a wall. If you add software which automates that process, you're only going to be going faster towards that wall. So it's often important to have domain knowledge in your solution providers, like we do at Talent Guard, that can help you build out that right process before you put in the solution. Roundabout way of getting to the question. So once you do that, we generally look at an implementation process, which could be 8 to 12 weeks to implement the solution. It's more dependent on often when the client is able to get their data together and get their team in place to actually work with ours to implement the solution. And again, if they have a good process in place and how much tweaking that our experts will need to help iron that out and make it a good process that'll automate well. We have another question. Yes, I think we talked about this one in an earlier question, but can you have different types of compensation programs for different groups or divisions? Yes, absolutely. Within the system, you are able to have compensation programs that are different for individuals and driven off of different factors. As I talked about, one group, for example, might be driven by their performance plus company performance. You could have others that are driven by revenue, others that are driven by profit. There's no limit to the amount of programs and factors that can be put into the compensation. But it's also worthy to note that as you're building out your compensation, the more factors you put into it, it could contribute to that aspect of people not being able to know how their compensation is derived. So don't get too complex with it to bring it to the point where the individual can't calculate how they're going to get paid. Then you start drifting apart in that pay versus performance gap that we talked about earlier. So I believe that is all the questions we have today. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you've gotten a lot out of the presentation, and I would look forward to seeing as many of you who can to attend the demonstration next week. I would also invite you all to visit the Talent Guard site for compensation planning, but also for their fantastic performance management, career pathing, and other great solutions. And whether it's compensation or one of those, contact Talent Guard for some of the best solutions you'll see in the talent market. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.